the people who were playing my music when I first dropped a track, just like my first ever piece of music that I made myself, that I made public, the people playing them were mainly the dolls, the trans girls in Brooklyn. When I was touring, what, like almost 2 years, yeah, 2 years ago now, exactly, in February, um, I performed in Colombia, met some people. I was there for like almost 2 weeks. And I spent a lot of time in Medellin. And so I met friends of friends. And then, of course, the first boy to treat me a certain way, I was very excited by. And then, you know, then I go to Mexico and I play some shows there. Then I play a show in Texas. And then I go back to Mexico. And then at that time, I had just done a big job. And I was like, you know, it was my first five-figure paycheck, and I was just like feeling fun. And I was like, you know what? Like, the flight isn't that crazy from Mexico City back to Medellin. I have a place to stay. I have a lover to check out, and did that. And then I was stuck there through my birthday. Couldn't come because the airline I was supposed to fly back with, like, was shut down.
Really?
Like, yeah, the night before I was going to leave. And so then they were rescheduling all of these things. Like, there was some like law in Colombia that changed that week, and it caused
Of
havoc.
course.
Yeah. And I was just like, great, I'm stuck here. But of course, I was like, I'm stuck in my favorite city with this beautiful Colombian man. But now my algorithm for the last 2 years has just been like Colombian men, and like
Mhm.
I'm like, oh God, they're different there. They're built different.
Tell us a little more about these Colombians.
Oh, just like I mean, just the way, not
They're
beyond the
really cute.
look.
I'm from Miami, so like
Yeah,
I
you get it.
yes,
Yeah,
totally.
and it's just like, but it's like the warmth and the like.
Mm.
I love being overly romantic because that's the way I am. It's like I'm Mexican, you know. It's like
Mm.
you get it. It's like
Totally.
Latinos,
Oh my
we're
God.
all just very like,
So
you know,
extra. Even when I
yeah.
feel I'm being restrained, my partner lets me know that like I'm a lot for him at the moment. So like we're definitely, yeah, not aligned sometimes, but I do love that kind of romantic vibe that you only get with guys from certain culture. I remind myself one of the great things about being queer and about having a queer relationship is that there's no rules and you do whatever you want.
Totally.
And my friend group is made up of like six straight cis couples, right? And
Oh wow,
yeah,
that's intense.
it is so intense and I love them all. But there are moments where I do see, how pressure from what everyone's doing in the group sort of seeps into, Frank and I, and we always have to remind ourselves like, wait, like we're not following any trajectory. The beauty of this is we could do whatever we want and figure it
Exactly.
out and change and not like have to have these crazy commitments and institutional things, and so when things get a little strange, I always like kind of remind myself of like it's amazing that we can do whatever we want.
Totally. And I think it's the opposite with me. It's like most of my friends are like queer, all of them, and in a very um like very progressive sense. I think that also the community that I have in nightlife, like nightlife, especially the people who run it, are very, very like progressive people or very experimental people with the ways they decide to curate their lives. You know, it's like the beauty of nightlife is that it is a space of imagination and fantasy, and that seeps into the way we live our lives. You know, like I think that has really shifted my mind a lot. I feel like when I was younger, especially when I moved, so when I moved to New York, I U-hauled with this man that I was dating who was much older than I was, and he had like you know, he was a doctor, like that was his whole thing,
Mm.
and I was gonna be the, cute musician wife, basically. That was the dynamic that was established. And that was what I wanted or thought I wanted, especially when I was younger. And I was, in a way, accepting all the things that were put in front of me that made logical sense. As much as my life has made absolutely no sense. Like my whole trajectory before that, it was just like, from the hood to the conservatory to the pursuing an orchestral life, but then being in this relationship that was really involved and I thought was going to turn into this, American dream kind of vibe. Um, and then it all just like disappeared. And then I was like, oh shit, like, what do I actually want?
Mm.
And then I had to confront really uncomfortable truths, and questions. And for the longest time, I was, I'm still very much like, I think what gives me peace is this concept of monogamy when I'm in relationships. I think that helps me, and not in a possessive way, just in a like I have two parents that have been together forever, so therefore like I have this like
It's like
comfort
yeah, it's like an
in that.
archetype.
Exactly, but also a comfort in that trajectory
Mm.
versus like, a lot of my friends that are very anti were, they come from a very different kind of upbringing as well. And so I always thought that was like the way that would make the most sense for me. And to this day, there's like, I would say I'm now more like, you know, a little more than 50% on that side.
Mm.
But the whole other half of me is just like, well, maybe I do want to have multiple partners or
Mm.
explore all of that. And I think being single, I've been single now for like almost 2 years or more than 2 years. I don't, yeah, more than 2 years now. And, I've been so focused on making music and like pursuing that and creating the world or fantasy that is Concrete Husband. And that's had to like, that's the priority. That's what I've been focused on. But now that things are changing and my life is changing and I'm thinking about what the future will hold, it's like it's making me reconsider what kind of romantic relationships I want or what kind of relationships I
Mm.
want, period, in
Mm-hmm.
general. Because also friendships, that's a whole other gray
Yeah.
area. Because I have plenty of friends that I'm very platonic with. I have plenty of friends that I'm not platonic with. And we show love in many different ways. And
No, but there's also, I think, some beauty in being able to discover that, right? And having
Mhm.
that freedom, especially being queer, to explore. In our first conversations, I think we were talking a lot about this idea of like reinvention and
Mhm.
like reassessing, remaking, redoing, refiguring out. And I feel like that also comes into play, right? In like your personal life. Like I feel like I'm making a connection there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an experimental boy from the start in every sense of the word. It's like I've I feel like the freedom in not just giving into what's presented and questioning it and imagining what other possibilities there are have like honestly gotten me to experience some of the best things I've ever experienced in my life, both professionally and personally, and it's given me a lot of adventure in my life. And I think that, yeah, this willing, not just willingness, but this kind of like comfort or understanding that if we don't change, then we stop growing, right?
Mm.
Like it's sound and saying it out loud, it sounds like, oh duh, but it's like I feel like a lot of people lose that. And now that I'm a part of a lot of underground communities, it's like all we have is each other,
Mm. Mm.
ultimately. And a lot of us don't have family in the traditional sense here. And that's why this concept of chosen family, as cheesy as some people think it is, and I know a lot of queer people are very like, fuck that term. But
Mm.
I do believe in that. I do really
Mhm.
believe that, like, um, you know, we don't always have to be tied to those that um, are blood related. And like,
Mm.
you know, I have a complicated history with my family, and like, um, which I'm open about. And uh, I think that it's that schism that happened when I was a teenager, when I came out, and it led to a lot of um, shifts in my perspective as to what family can do, what they're
Mm,
capable of, and it's led me to just understand that like it's up to me to decide, you know, who really gets let into my life, and it's
mm,
let me create boundaries and really like empowered me and created confidence in my confidence was built from that, honestly. And I remember at one point, because I moved out of my home when I was young and I
mm,
lived with my flute teacher, and there was a moment where she said to me like, you know it's always complicated with biological family, but you have the power to create whatever family you want,
mm,
and like understand that. And it was like, you're right, because she also in a sense has, if we think about traditional American values, you know it's she lives an untraditional life, even though
mm,
she is very traditional. Like,
right.
don't get me wrong, she's very she's a traditional woman, but I think that like she never had biological children, but she has like she's like a mother to me. Like if I
Mm,
get married, which I hope to be one day, like I want a wedding. I
for
want the
sure.
whole thing. I want to be
Yes.
Mr. Husband. Like fuck that. Like um but right now, like, and I've said this for a few years, like, you know, my biological family, my biological mother and I, we have a very um you know uh, we've had a tough history, but we're like at this space now where it's like, okay, we've got to just like move on from everything. And
Mm,
like, we're not necessarily rebuilding. I know she is, but I'm very much just like, I have my boundaries
mm,
in terms of what I know she's willing to engage with and what she's not. And it's not changed. So like, I understand her limitations.
mm,
And, there was this one point where I was a dog walker and it was awful. I was walking around in Tribeca in the middle of winter crying because I was cold. And I was talking to her and we just got into this fight where, she was just like, when are you getting a girlfriend and all of that whole thing.
mm,
And I was just like, look, we've had this conversation. You've known about me being gay since I was literally 14 years old. Like I was outed by my school. So that was a
what?
whole thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And so that's all to say that if I am to ever get married, like this, Elena's her name. She's gonna like if I think of who's gonna give me away or who's gonna walk down the aisle or whatever, it's like it's gonna be her. Like she represents this like maternal figure at a very pivotal point, and I think that that also has given me like this sense of freedom
Mm,
in allowing different people to take that role
mm,
in different
mm,
spaces. It's
mhm,
like my nightlife, a lot of my nightlife friends aren't my regular daytime friends, right?
mm,
They are my friends and I love them, and
for
I'll,
sure.
they're not, they're, what is it? They're so intertwined into the way I live life that, they're my closest people.
Hmm.
But then there are some nightlife people that go into that space, into the, weeknight
Hmm.
dinner space of my
For
life.
sure. Yeah.
And I think that's in each of those spaces, in the clubs, in the concert halls, in the studios, and wherever I am, like everybody kind of occupies different familial roles,
For
right?
sure.
And I think that's, yeah, I forgot how I went on that
Well, no,
tangent.
no. I think what we're talking about is being empowered to create your own family,
Totally.
and it's something that I think yeah, queer people are kind of like sick of like talking about that or hearing about that. But I also think, even as New Yorkers, we all feel that. I feel like
Totally.
with my friends who I went to school with and grew up. In my industry with, we're all close because we're here, we're toughing it out, we're
Yep.
New York or whatever. And but there's this idea of empowerment that you have when you can have autonomy and choose your own, whether that's your own family or even like how it trickles down and how you choose collaborators or
Totally.
how you identify people that you, for example, like can be inspired by, see yourself in a
Hmm.
little bit, and also like, yeah, just kind of like be curious about them. And I think like when you're talking about how curiosity is like the engine that propels your change, you know, like
Totally.
it's from, you know, whether it's your sexuality, your music, or even how you go about doing business. Like
Right.
curiosity has sparked that, and hearing you say that, like I relate to that. And when I came across Concrete Husband, immediately it appealed to me. I think the visuals that I saw, the music that I saw, there was something about it. I didn't know much about you or anything about you, but
Right.
I thought like, oh no, this is like someone I absolutely would love to collaborate with. This is someone that like can build a world and create a sound and create a vision and ultimately transport an emotion and a feeling. And like that to when I encounter an artist, a band, or anyone that can do that, it always gets my attention. And
Mm.
because I feel like there's a part of me that I can relate to that. I
Yeah,
you
no,
know.
I love that that's what you got from what I've put out into the world, because that's like what makes me most excited about making music is creating environments or creating experiences, right? Like I think that when I was just doing classical music, it was very much a sport. You know, it was like I was a craftsman trying to execute someone else's vision, but ultimately, fully artistically, like I had no real agency, right? I
Mm,
was just an interpreter,
mm,
basically. And, then when I started to make my own music, um, it was a way for me to almost document my memories of certain experiences I was having, right? And I to this day I still think like I produce like every day, even if
mm,
it's just a little sketch, or if I even if I don't have a job where I have to produce something for it. Um, it's just kind of like how I keep track of
mm,
how I am, you
mm,
know? And the experience I've had that, I never intended to become a professional DJ. Like that was a full wild card, like left field, experience in my life. But it's because I love dance music and it's so exciting to me and it like changed my life. It's given me a life. Like truly.
mm,
And I when I approach these gigs, especially like the very special ones I have, I of course think they're all special, but there are some where you're just like, it's like when I'm playing a basement, or I'm playing, when I played Knockdown Center, or if I'm playing these, places outside of the city, it's like I always have to envision like who are the people that I want to inspire within the space. Like I think about the memories of the spaces I inhabited and how those were uh energetically or emotionally driven. And you know then after that, in conjunction with like my production practice, which also like I've worked with dancers, I've worked with choirs, I've worked with in stage settings, I've worked with you know like digital media, I guess,
mm,
films, videos, whatever. It's like eh, I can't separate any of my approach with that with the way I approach my DJing, because I feel like you're trying to capture something very specific for that specific amount of time, and you only have that amount of time. And then it's like, how can you most effectively and most broadly communicate this emotion, this feeling, this energy? And I feel like DJing definitely is like it definitely shifted me, because the other thing is like I DJ a very specific kind of event and a very specific kind of sound with very specific intentions.
mm-hmm,
And I appreciate and love all my DJ friends who are like very eclectic
mm-hmm,
DJs and can play in every space and do play in every space. But the DJs that do a very singular thing, I think that we have to engage with the way we create space, right? Because people expect a certain kind of aesthetic from us, but
mm.
also like how do you make it fresh and exciting each time? How do you like I'm gonna play a little differently at a certain kind of techno party than I would at another
For sure,
one,
you're reading the room.
exactly, without even being in the room.
Exactly, right, because you're reading the room, and it's almost maybe a step above it. You're it's almost like you're orchestrating the room,
100%.
right?
Oh,
Like
totally.
curious for us, and the for me and people listening, how you landed in that very specific type of DJ role.
Oh, because I love techno more than other types of music, electronic dance music at least. Um, I definitely started my obsession with dance music through like 90s vocal house from New York. Like that
Mm.
was my introduction. And I used to play, God, I forget who produced it, but The Bomb. um it's a very old known classic, and I went down this rabbit hole of you know of 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 that kind of music. And this was towards the end of my time at conservatory, so it was just kind of like, I kind of knew I was going to move to New York, but
Hmm.
didn't quite know. And
So let's get a sense of a timeline, right? So like you grew up
San Diego.
in San Diego,
Yeah,
you were there. Where was the conservatory?
it was in
In
Boston.
okay,
Yeah,
so okay.
so I did that. I went there. I moved to New York in 2018,
Hmm.
and then that's when I still was predominantly just focused on classical music, classical avant-garde music. That was my whole reason for being here. I was going to be Mr. Experimental Flute Boy, because that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the training I had, but also like the lineage of the artists that inspired me the most during that period were the experimental musicians, the experimental flutists, like in my mind, the experimental flutist of our, time right now. Like she was my mentor. She's from San Diego. Like she really believed in me when a lot of people didn't. And like she understood what I was going through at the time. But even then, I was not white enough. I was not straight enough. I was
Mm.
not conservative enough to be in those spaces, even, like
In those experimental
experimental
spaces?
spaces. Yeah, totally.
Interesting.
It's like, it's giving, I adore and I'm so grateful for all of the opportunities I've had. But, there were a lot of moments with people, both like faculty people that I worked with, teachers, mentors that I worked with, and peers that would always just kind of like view me in a specific way. They appreciated what I did, and I'm a very good flutist. And so that's where we were level, right? When
Mm.
we were doing the work. But outside of that, I was like, oh fuck, I don't know if I want to be around this.
Fair.
And it was still not as bad as classical music, because like when I was playing in an orchestra, um, there was a moment where the conductor, who was, a 70-year-old British man, he said, we were in a rehearsal of Beethoven's Third, and we were playing, the slower movement, and I was the principal flutist at the time, and I just remember, like, he stopped the orchestra after this passage. I had a solo passage, and he was like, "Can you just forget your heritage and play like a nice German girl?" He said that in front of everybody, and this was just like an ongoing thing, and this happened so much. And like, you know, instead of finding more constructive, helpful ways of better understanding this language, because that kind of music is a very specific language. All classical Western academic music, it's like yeah, it's a specific style. The same way that like if somebody came up to me and was like, trying to learn techno,
Mm.
it's like I'm not just gonna be like, can't you just, be, more in tune with, with what's going on, or cooler or whatever,
Right.
or like loosen up, or
Right.
I don't know. Like I wouldn't say
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. Well, but techno also too, right, has this sort of background and
There's a
history
huge
of
history.
right, like
Yes.
and like not doing things a certain way. But even I'm sure in these spaces there's also formalities that you have to follow.
There are, yeah, yeah. I think now there are more than before, but like if we look at the way it started, it's like we think about any sort of aesthetic movement or change, and it was all brought on by this form of resistance. Like I
Mm.
think that's a big part of techno, and I think the way techno is culturally relevant right now, especially TikTok techno. That's what we call it, when it's like just like really hard techno that's fast and edits, and it's like that's what the majority of the people think techno is.
Right.
And the you can't everything has to change, even if it's rooted in the same foundation.
Yeah, and everything is changing, and I feel like in a lot of ways, what we are championing at Cult of Sound is the idea that we are the musical extension of whatever creative team it is that we're working on. And like you do, like teams do, they collaborate, but they also have ownership
Hmm.
over certain things. And, everything that you work on, it feels like you begin with a creative approach that's yours.
Hmm.
Whether it's you're creating a techno track, a score for a film or a spot, or anything else, it all comes down to like a certain, to me it sounds like it's like a certain process that you have in your mind. um, and the output of that process is a culmination of like taking taking it beyond the brief, hitting what it needs to hit, but also um, it's uniquely yours.
Right.
And I feel like, yeah, even in my own work, I come from the advertising world. I'm a creative director. I'm on a different project, different brand every time. Every brand is a new world. Every brand is a new set of, rules that you have to follow. But I think in my work, I do see a thread, where the work that I create in some way or another brings people together or evokes
Mm.
an idea of connection. And because that's kind of how I see the world. I'm always trying to make connections,
Right.
whether it's, through a conversation or visuals that I see or ideas that happen. And, that in a lot of ways, my process, and you see it throughout my work. So interesting to like hear you, yeah, sort of like set up how you go about creating, for all these different mediums. And, the people that know your work can spot that.
Yeah, no, it's super. I'm happy that there's always an element of me that kind of lingers in whatever I'm doing. It's something that I didn't expect to have, honestly. I think I go about my life making music just because I love it, honestly. Like, and then the other stuff comes into play later. I mean, I think a lot about the 19th century salon, and I think about how that's so similar to the club.
Mm.
It's like that's a moment where and during that time, what allowed it was that keyboard instruments and the invention, the piano becoming so prominent in culture. Um,
Electricity.
right. Yeah, but beyond that, like the piano itself was allowing people to just make their own music, and now we have DAWs that allow people to make music from home, and what I think right now that like our version of the piano and the cultural impact it had is the CDJ and the DJing equipment, because that's creating a whole big wave internationally of young people who didn't necessarily study music and are now able to become professional musicians and start engaging with that. And I know a lot of people who are professional DJs who are learning now how to produce and how to create their own music and how to expand it beyond dance music. Like,
It's empowering, truly.
yeah, it's liberating. Like, that's how we continue to dismantle this. Like, um, I mean, I'm forever in the pursuit of continuing to dismantle classism, and I think that that was a big part of my life and a big part of the way I had to navigate life and understand how it all works. And I think that, I love technology for that. It continues to level out the playing field. I don't know what the future holds, but
Mm.
presently, that's that's what we that's what's allowed us to broaden the people who engage with it. It's like we think a lot about the people who respect music or respect art, and it's people who tend to engage with it, right? And if now people can engage with it through just the love of DJing for fun for themselves with
Mm.
no pursuit besides that, just at home with their loved one or themselves, and just can connect to music and without this need to be technically perfect or on a stage. Like, that's going to allow more people to connect to music and therefore more people to question things and engage with like their own emotions, their own thoughts, and then that's going to continue to, you know, inspire change in general, you know.
You know, I love the idea that your work and the work that anyone puts out in the world is also um it's also like you expressing, putting it out there, and also, you're doing that, but at the same time, it's inspiring people and touching people in ways that you couldn't even imagine, couldn't even, would never even thought of.
Totally.
Um, which in a way is like, it's almost like the work that we put out in the world sparks that curiosity in other people that
Totally.
makes them want to go. I'll never forget the first time, I saw a movie that uh, just like blew me away so much that it made me think of how was this made, who made this, or a song, and so yeah,
Totally.
like the stuff you're putting out there, for it to be like a Trojan horse for curiosity for people.
Totally. And like, you know, I I feel the most fulfillment being able to connect through my work with people that, very much reflect a similar background and um, in whatever gradation of that. And when I started in this very specific European focused techno scene in New York, um, the scene was very different, and you know um, there there's just incredible techno being made everywhere, and I just know that like for the longest time it was mostly white European people playing at in these sorts of spaces. And as you know, I've been, given the opportunity many times to play in these spaces and bring a specific perspective. It's it's directly touched a lot of people that were not there before. There are a lot of very, very young Latinos that I had never seen. Like in the green room, for example, it was just like me and my other friend. We were the two Mexicans that would hang out at the techno things, and now it's like there's a huge community of run by Colombians. The Colombian techno scene is strong. When I went down there, I was like, damn, they really have it down here. Like the music, the art, oh, it's
The
just
looks, the men, the
everything.
food.
Yeah, everything. Literally, I'm just like send me to Medellin. But but like they recently, as I had been given a bigger platform in the city, um, there are moments with you know young aspiring like Latino techno artists in the broad sense. They might play a different type of techno because within techno there are so many subgenres. Um, some play similar techno, but uh, there was this one moment after like this very long streak of me just playing like every dream gig I had in the space of techno in New York. And I was at basement and I was in the bathroom with some friends, like waiting to use the bathroom. And this very like young person that I don't know, it's like there's so many. There were people being like concrete husband, concrete. Some people still call me concrete, and it's very sweet when it's like these very young kids who like just moved here and for whatever reasons, but they felt inspired by the fact that I was just inhabiting those spaces and given the opportunities to perform in these spaces, kind of a reminder that like the limitations that I thought were there somehow are starting to be broken down by my own presence. And that's what's crazy. It's like, you know, again, as things are changing in the world, it's like it's a good reminder that like sometimes that a political radical act is just being yourself. And, like that's what I try to remind myself as things get really intense. And like, you know, when I got back from my gig in from Copenhagen recently, like what, a week and a half ago now, like it was my first time going through secondary inspection, and I was told that I was brought in to be questioned just because my name's on a common names list.
Really?
Yeah, and at Newark, yeah, and I was just like, what do you mean? Like, what? And it was like, oh, I understand. Like, this was like this is as all the deportation stuff is going on, and so I assume what they mean by common names list. It's like we've seen them do this to people of many cultures, right?
Sure.
But I've never had it happen, and I was like, oh shit. And I'm like, I'm born raised here, like I am first generation, like I only have a US passport. And the fact that they didn't believe that my passport was good enough for me to just go through, and it had to be flagged, and it was just like very strange. I'm like, welcome home. I even told the officer, I was just like, I'm going home. Like I had just flown in from Copenhagen, like after a weekend of a gig. I literally flew there for the weekend and came back, and it was just, I was exhausted. And it was just a very strange experience. But I was like, okay, I talked to some friends, and they're going through their own sets of fears. And like, I can't imagine what my trans friends are going through right now. And it's just like, it's fucking heartbreaking. They're like, the trans community has, like, they gave me my first opportunity on many levels. Like the people who were playing my music when I first dropped a track, just like my first ever piece of music that I made myself, that I made public, the people playing them were mainly the dolls, the trans girls in Brooklyn. And literally within a few days, all of a sudden I have thousands of international play. It was just like that. And I was like, I was getting tagged in a whole bunch of shit. And now, and it was being played in all of these venues. And this was before I was even a DJ. I was just a party boy making some, electronic music. But it's just like, you know, my trans family throughout the years, it's just like they're part of the reason that I've been able to grow, and they're the ones who take care of me when I need to be taken care of. Like, life in New York sucks and is hard, and I'm never judged. I'm always welcomed, and we look out of, we look out after each other. And like the way, queer people, but especially trans people, gender nonconforming people, how they view the world is just so expansive. It's so like like just so fucking inspiring. It's like that's part of the reason I'm able to exist in the multitudes that I exist in. Like that's part of why my name has my artist name has stayed the way it does, because that's also this encompassing of something that's beyond this um singular identity. It's a dichotomy in my mind that those two words create in my mind a dissonance. And I think that it's, yeah, there's just so much changing in the world right now that the only thing that we can really do on our day to day is just like unapologetically continue existing, and like supporting each other as much as we can, because shit's getting scary for a lot of people. Not to get dark, but it's getting scary, and it's getting scary fast. And I had that you can feel the shift everywhere, even the parties, the concerts, everything. It's like you feel the energy shifting. And so that's why I'm like, I'm gonna start playing some happier techno now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like change this energy. It's dark, like I fell
It's like the
into it.
response to the energy is like propelling you to change, to shift, to evolve.
Yeah,
Not just you, everyone,
we
right?
have
It's
to. That's, I mean, that's the plight of man, right? To continue evolving, continue changing. You adapt or die. That concept. It's like, that might be a little intense, but for some people it is that.
no, I think it's very fitting and true, especially in the world we're living today.